we've actually had quite a lot of people here. This last few days, I'm not sure if they weren't all here, we'd be about 10 or so, wouldn't we? And there are another 3 or 4 due in the next few days, so that's just how it's sort of worked out. There's only 3 of us plus an old hand here, and 3 of us very old hands. But anyway, never mind. Well, as always, you might have guessed that I'm going to start, as I always do, by coming back to what we might call the first principles, which, for me at least, are feet on the ground, bottom on the chair, simply looking and listening. It quite magically, without us doing anything extra, brings us into this presence, doesn't it? This still place, which has been here at every chakra meeting since we've started, and is in fact everywhere with us, always, all our lives. Are you familiar with what I'm saying, dear? I don't want to talk over your head, but if you can't follow me, just let me know, dear. Don't be shy, because otherwise there's no point my talking if you don't get what I'm trying to say. Because actually, it's the simplest of the simplest. Give her another year and she'd be able to understand, wouldn't she? Let her leave. But she probably gets it now, probably better than we do. Just to be present in the now, the here and now. And what is it that we find? Well, very simply, it's just the simple fact that it doesn't change. Everything else changes, but this doesn't, does it? It's eternally and ever the same. When we first hear of it, of course it seems a bit strange. And I had a chap here yesterday afternoon who didn't like it at all when I tried to tell him to be present. But then, much to my surprise, he seemed to sort of get it. But after much protest, I felt quite uncomfortable, sort of, in a way, trying to put him somewhere where he didn't want to be. I think when I stopped trying, actually, and yes, that's what happened. I stopped trying. I thought I'd better sort of step back from this. And to my amazement, sort of before my eyes, he suddenly became present. We'll just pause a moment while some more coffee is being served.
Thank you very much. No,
if we ourselves are more or less present, it's surprising how everything else is contained, isn't it? The little process of the waitress bringing the coffee upstairs, people downstairs, the traffic outside. There's a sense that life goes on without our needing to do anything really, apart from just rest in this presence. Be at rest. One of the cardinal principles of meditation that I was taught many years ago is don't look for results. It's again quite a difficult pill for people to swallow in this day and age, when everybody wants results. Don't look for results. What can this mean? How can we make sense of it? Well, I thought just now, resting in this presence, there didn't seem to be much result flowing from it, was there? It didn't seem as though there was an aim really to it, not a result. It was complete in itself. Somehow it contained the situation without needing to do anything extra. It seems to me, as I look back over my long life, that life is just one long school which doesn't end in old age. The lessons of life seem to continue and go on and on. I was thinking it's nearly 8 years ago that I made the first notes and wrote a little poem that has developed into my last book, called Of Mystic Union. Our life tends to centre around a restless child, doesn't it? Dear, we're talking about how when I first started to meditate, I was told not to look for results. And what an important principle this is, not only of meditation, but extending it into life itself. Although it seems so contrary to the way we think these days. Yes, I come back to this book that I've been writing 8 years, and which really is the culmination of my whole life's work. I can't tell you how many hours I've struggled over every little phrase and word. And I've got a rather sobering fact to swallow now, because I've just had it put into book form on the computer, which means that it's 450 pages on my computer has now swelled to over 600 pages in book form. Now, my dears, which of you, least of all anybody else in this hurried, worried world, is going to sit down and read 600 pages of my latest love story? This is my 10th book, and I've had to swallow one very big lesson throughout the last 25 years or so, that not many people want to read my books, written out with such loving care. In fact, the only hope I seem to have of reaching anybody is with audiobooks, when people are doing something else. And they're just listening as a background noise.
Go to sleep.
Go to sleep. So much for my ambitions to become a well-known writer. But, you know, I've had all sorts of little comforts about this. That results, or at least our projected results, aren't really it. I mean, do you think the stars up in the sky worry about how many people are receiving their light? Do you think they count the number of... Oh, I've had so many thousands of people admiring me this morning. And what about every little flower, every little daisy that blooms unseen, unknown, and dies away? It's extraordinary, isn't it? Nature's full of examples of little miracles that take place completely unknown, unrecorded, unnoticed by anybody. What do we know about these things, dear? What do we know about these things? But seriously, what's this whole creative business for? You're a creative man, Morris. All the hours you've poured into making some perfect drawing and conceiving some marvellous building that's destined to fall down again in a few years, dust to dust, talking about castles in the sand. What? And all of us who've put our hearts and souls into some sort of work or creative something, it all comes to pass, doesn't it? This last book of mine, well, you may know that the book I've just published, my 9th book, is called Mystic Love, which describes, this was 40 years ago when I first looked into the eyes of a woman and I saw the infinite ocean of love, which I then fell into and never wanted to come out. But unfortunately I've had to live a long time since then, and life doesn't allow us to stay in these nice states, does it? It throws us back into the world of separation. So this book, Mystic Love, records a 40-year correspondence with this woman that just about reached the point where we both recognized that in this presence there is something that doesn't depend. There's something we can share which doesn't depend on our personal whims, on our personal love you or don't love you. It's a simple fact, isn't it? Just sitting here without knowing that much about each other. There's something that unites us, which is other than the normal personal interaction, personal relationships. Well, that's the point I reached with this woman in my 9th book. And my 10th book takes it even further, to where the John Butler has, step by gradual step, because I assure you that although you seem to jump out of it occasionally, you then get sucked back again, where the John Butler has almost died out. So the I love you has dissolved rather amazingly, where even the differentiation between man and woman drops out of the scene, and what one can only really call the love of God is left. Well, there's 600 pages taking you step by step through this process. But there you are. Who's going to read it? Who even would want to read such a thing? I don't know that I would years ago, when my reality was I love you, was focused on one particular embodiment. So, what's it all for, is it? And then there's that little phrase, isn't there? Written in heaven. What does that mean? I think it was often, people talked about those who had died, didn't they? Soldiers lost in a war, lost soldiers with no known grave. Their names are written in heaven. They're recorded somewhere, up somewhere, God knows where, but not in human terms. Perhaps that's what it's all about. Perhaps that's what these little daisies, where these daisies are recognized and recorded and loved. Why not? Orthodoxy uses a phrase, eternal memory. It's used particularly when you're praying for the dead or at funerals, eternal memory. The Orthodox Church, the Orthodox version of Christianity, which I'm well acquainted with through living many years in Russia, which has rather a sort of different take on Christianity from the modern Western interpretation of it. This is much more otherworldly, really, not so humanity-based, more spiritual. As they talk of eternal memory. I find that very comforting, because when one reflects that what does one's worldly life add up to? 10 years after we've died, who will remember us? Those of us that have children, they might for a bit, although I can hardly remember my mum and dad now. When did I last go up to see their grave? Extraordinary, isn't it, how we just disappear from this world. Our books, all those outpourings of the heart, how can they just flow down the river of time and be lost? Or do they, in some way, are they taken into the eternal memory, into what? We don't know, do we? Is this book of mine written in vain? Does it matter if hardly anybody's going to read it? Not really, is it? Thank you, Phil. I think that really hits the nail on the head. Of course, this has been told to me by various friends trying to comfort me over the years. And indeed, I feel that eventually our own experience catches up with it, and it does become more real to us. It's such a long, gradual evolution from this world of results, of things, sort of giving way to this higher consciousness, this higher point of view. Where indeed it seems the value of our work is less how many we sell on internet, and more written in heaven, for heaven, in God's hands, not ours. Going back to my not so early days in the school of meditation that sort of got me started in this work, I remember being told, these were words from the authority behind the school. He said, when realized, it becomes operative. If we come back to that, as we just how we started this meeting, by just pausing, being aware of this presence, doesn't it actually become operative? Doesn't that? I mean, it goes out of the window, doesn't it? Doesn't it actually? It's not confined to just us, is it? Even if we get it, it somehow contains the situation, doesn't it? Does it actually go all the way over to the Gaza Strip and Ukraine and contain all the things that are happening there within this overall infinite peace, infinite rest? Then realized it becomes operative. How can just sitting in the church morning and evening in silence be of any use whatsoever? I saw particularly in your eyes, Liam, yesterday, after meditation, I looked at you. Did I see a man called Liam, or did I see light? What's the difference? Is there a difference? What happens to that light? To some extent, there's light in all our eyes. It varies, doesn't it? Sometimes it's, incredibly, unbelievably bright, like sort of meaningful. Other times it's more sort of what you might call normal, sort of, recognizable, but hardly. No. Light. We're told, aren't we, let our light shine. Light in the darkness. When our eyes, as they so often are clouded and absent and anything but light. But when you see the light clearly, my goodness, it becomes real, doesn't it? You are the light of the world. And what is the world, anyway? If you look at the world, it consists of 50% light and 50% shadow, doesn't it? That's what makes forms and shapes, doesn't it? How can separation exist in light? Is it possible? The last book of the Bible, called Revelation, it tries to describe the what it calls the holy city, the light. It's light. So does every tiny recognition of light in our progress go some way towards diminishing the powers of darkness. Is this interplay of influence bearing a result quite other than the level at which we normally think of it? How many books are we going to sell this week? It's sort of at a higher level, isn't it? Higher level of reality. Maybe the little unknown daisies and unread books do have a purpose. Coming back again to our practice of meditation, perhaps in your own experience you'll endorse that it isn't really a matter of getting anything, is it? So much as realizing it. How can we get this presence? You can't really, even if it's here, you can't grab it and hold it, can you? Like you can't hold the sky, really, or hold spring, or hold anything, really. Well, of course we can in this world. We try to hold on to things. It's only darkness, isn't it, that actually creates forms and matter. Yes, absence of light. It's very comforting, isn't it, when from another point of view you seem to be a failure in this world and nobody loves you, nobody wants you. I find this process of dying out is really very comforting, that somehow you're taken into, the responsibility is taken off my shoulders, really. You feel like almost like you are going back to your father, and he'll say, well done, old chap, you've done your best, or something like that. It's not, I find no threat in it at all, but my dad was an artist, and he so wanted to be recognised as an artist. He was in a modest way among the sort of people that were interested in him, but he didn't sort of get into the big stuff, the big time. I always thought that somehow the great motive of my life has been love, or of course starting off with my own conceptions of love into a very gradual recognition that this presence is also love. It's not sort of, it's not that sort of demonstrative, I must touch you sort of love, is it? And yet, it touches us subtly, doesn't it? I love the phrase, the everlasting arms, the comforter. It is really, isn't it? It's, we all have this image of being held and comforted in a woman's arms, but actually it's just like that, isn't it? But in a higher and eternal and never say no dimension, isn't it? And where does that end and light begin? This light. Or is it just the same thing? Does one just melt into the other? Light, dark. We attach such sort of significance to words, don't we? Yet I'm not sure they don't. All words really just melt into one sort of one meaning with a capital M. Aren't words themselves indicative of separation? A sort of, if not a visible darkness, a sort of mental darkness, a sort of mental divisiveness that forms words. God is described in the Bible, both God is love, but also God is light. So, what does it matter? Sort of a speculation seems a bit silly, doesn't it? Unnecessary. But the whole work of meditation really is to let go that and just naturally rise into the experiential level. That's why it's so important to take on board this instruction, don't look for results. Because all the results are conceptual. They're our own projection of what we want or think we want. To be a success, you know, to get it, to become famous. Isn't it marvellous, Maurice, how we can sort of laugh at it in this context, can't we? It doesn't really seem so important, does it, at this moment now? Then we go back home to the drawing board, and once again it's terribly important. I sit there worrying about this book of mine, and what on earth I'm going to do with it. Oh dear, what happens to all that bird song? You know, the skylarks are tuning up now, aren't they? The lovely spring. What are they singing to? I never could make much sense of, you know, all the angels praising God. What on earth does that mean? And don't they get bored just praising God? I mean, what? Does God sit there sort of smiling at, God, you're marvellous, God, you're marvellous. What are they singing anyway? So, anyway, perhaps it does make a bit more sense now. In fact, one sort of comes off this conceptual picture of the angels singing, but just reflect on a day like this. You could feel the sort of creation sort of glowing, can't you? Glowing with, well, why not praise of the glory of spring after 6 months of winter. Just thank God for sunshine. And, I don't know if you noticed, as we walked down the church, the steps of the terrace outside the door yesterday morning, I looked down and there was a little dark spot on the stone. And I couldn't sort of get low enough to see properly. But it looked to me just like a ladybird that had come out the day before and then got caught as the evening got colder. And so it was stuck there overnight, waiting for the sun to wake it up again. I thought, it's just sort of like a little lesson of this overall loving care of God for his creatures. It just melts one's heart, doesn't it? The love of God that cares for his ladybirds as he does for us. The sons of God, say it again, Phil. The sons of God coming into their own.
And all creations straining on tiptoe just to see the sons of God coming to their own.
When realised, it becomes operative, doesn't it? And that somehow is available for everybody, isn't it? There's another very interesting thing that actually I've put this in on the preface to this latest book of mine. I don't know how I came into my mind, but someone must have told me. You know the great Ramana Maharshi, one of the great recent teachers, died not so long ago. Apparently one of the things he said was that your own self-realization is the greatest gift you can give to the world. which again seems so in a way contradictory to our normal worldly way of thinking in terms of, financial aid and all these sort of things. Feeding the hungry, your own self-realization is the greatest gift you can give to the world. Interesting, isn't it? Well, I don't either, Morris, and I certainly wouldn't make no claim to be self-realized. I'm not really sure what it means. I never have been sure of what it means. But funny enough, I altered something in my book just this morning. And I wrote down, this world, our present day sort of, is very full of self, isn't it? Self-importance, I must be true to myself, all this sort of thing. Self-rights, human rights. Well, I wrote down this way, self-loss. Now, if you, at this moment now, if you were to ask me what self-realization is, I'd say self-loss. When all sense of a separate identity is forgotten. John Butler, Mr. Nothing, it comes literally into, and then this, you see, this is what's left. I don't know what people will say. Maybe they might even read my books then when I'm dead and gone. Who knows? Yes, the pages of a book will moulder away, won't they? The language may be forgotten. So what is it that endures? The love that goes into it? And what do we mean by that? The love, the light, the consciousness. Our little love finds the great big love. Something like that, is it?
Yes.
Our little droplet merges with the ocean. Come home. The lost sheep comes home. I was rather surprised. A few days ago, I wrote a letter to someone. She's very ill. She had a big operation and is sort of hovering as to whether to live or die. And so she's been much in my mind. And I was thinking of her, but was also held in that blessed presence. I don't think I'd done it consciously, it just seemed to be there. I was thinking about it while writing to her. And I realised that actually this person, this singular person that was ill, was actually every person in the world that was ill. The whole world. All the ill and broken people held in this utter simplicity of this one that is not ill at all, this one perfection, this one presence. And then that became more the sort of anybody that's in trouble, one person is in trouble, became the whole world that's troubled, held in this that is untroubled, completely untroubled. Extraordinary really how simple it is. It sort of comes into us unbidden. Suddenly it becomes clear and simple. It's realised, isn't it? And in being realised, it becomes real and becomes operative. Amazing, isn't it? I suppose that's really how prayer works, what prayer is really. This whole troubled world is held in the untroubled. All our worries about results are held in the perfect trust. That's what we're told to do, isn't it, in the Bible? Trust. Trust in me. Trust. The confusion of our planning melts into this trust. And I think again of how can it be that in Jesus' life, when presumably, like us all, as far as we know, he also took on board the troubles of this world, got crucified for his pains, and yet his last words were, "Into thy hands." Extraordinary, isn't it, that was, or that's what we are given as an example of how to deal with this confusion of what to do. And having written out our wills and our legacies and all our plannings for, what else can we do on our deathbeds, really? It's all taken away from us. Into thy hands. And just here and now. There's comfort in that, isn't there? I'm going to ask you, Phil, once again to say those words about straining, all creation straining.
And all creations straining on tiptoe.
Yes. Just
to see the sons of God come into their own.
Yes. It is beautiful, isn't it? It's just like that. It's just like that, isn't it? It's just what we are doing here, isn't it? We're all at that sort of straining on tiptoe, aren't we? Because it's so near and dear. It's so near and available, isn't it? It's actually really, truly real. Isn't it? And there's a bubble of joy, isn't there, sort of comes out.
Like a relief, isn't it?
A relief, isn't it? A recognition and a relief, yes.
Thank God for that.
Yes. Thanks be to God. Yes. Oh dear.